Gledate emisiju Balkan u Evropi. Ja sam Borjan Jovanovski. Ovo izdanje našeg programa je posvećeno sve intenzivnijoj globalnoj kampanji protiv nevladinih udruga podržanih od Fondacije Otvoreno, društvo američkog milijardera i filantropa Georgea Sorosa. Priča je počela u Moskvi, koja je odlučila da zabrani rad ove fondacije. Sad se lopta prebacila u Mađarskoj, čija je vlada najavila zakon sa kojim će se zabraniti rad ove fondacije. Ova kampanja je dobila i naziv Stop za Sorosa i već se širi prema našoj regiji. Ona je dobila podršku i od nekoliko američkih kongresmena koji su zatražili da se preispita rad Fondacije Sorosa. Ovo izdanje Balkan u Evropi traži odgovore za razloge ove kampanje protiv jedne velike fondacije koja deluje od ranih 90-ih i koja je podržala rad stotinak nevladinih udruga u istočnoj i jugoistočnoj Evropi. Krećemo sa najnovijom inicijativom mađarske vlade. Odgovor za razloge ove inicijative smo zatražili od mađarskih poslanika u Evropskom parlamentu. Poslanici vladajuće stranke Viktora Orbana nisu prihvatili naš zahtev da odgovore na naša pitanja zašto mađarska vlada ide sa ovakvim kontraverznim zakonom koji udara na civilno društvo. Taj odgovor smo dobili od mađarskog poslanika u Evropskog parlamenta iz stranke Zelenih Javora Benedeka. Evo kako on tumači inicijativu vladajuće stranke.
In Hungary for years now there is an ongoing campaign against the civil society and NGOs as they are the last independent sources of citizens' will and perhaps the government regards them as a threat to the stability of the government. So that's why independent NGOs are regarded as enemies, public enemies in Hungary. And the campaign against the civil society started years before. So even the previous cycle, the government accepted a new NGO law, which was partly limiting rights and possibilities of the NGOs. But the campaign was really started in 2014 when the Norwegian government decided not to let the government to influence the spending of the Norway funds for NGOs according to the will of the government. And then the government started a campaign against NGOs with police raids at headquarters of NGOs, with investigations by the tax authority, and for more than 2 years there were a continuous pressure on the NGOs to make them feel fear regarding the government. Then all the investigations were completely senseless and useless, so the outcome of the investigations was that all of the NGOs were completely legal and there was no problem. But recently the government restarted the public campaign against the NGOs, first of all blaming George Soros with influencing Hungarian internal political issues and financing NGOs against the government. And at the beginning of the year, or since the beginning of the year, there is more and more talks about a possible new law regarding NGOs and civil society, which we don't know exactly what's going to be in, as the law is still not submitted to the parliament, but the information we receive, it's quite worrying, and it draws up a kind of Russian legislation for the civil society and for NGOs.
Ova globalna kampanja protiv Fondacije Otvorenog društva ovde u Evropskom parlamentu je privukla pažnju relevantnih parlamentarnih tela. Nedavno se na ovoj temi ovde u Briselu održala debata u Komitetu za građanska prava. Oko razloga ove debate zatražili smo komentare od evropskih poslanika koji su aktivno učestvovali u njoj. Da čujemo njihove komentare.
Well, I think we had some clear indications that the situation is very, very serious, and since 2014, about Orban's government has actually been undermining the work of civil society that tries to work against corruption, for democratic scrutiny, for gender equality, for LGBT rights, for minority rights, and the fact that NGOs have been attacked in this way, it's very concerning, and we got information about that. We also heard from the government that they don't see this as a problem at all. They see that as their right to intervene like this. But I think the majority of the committee members are very concerned. There can be no democracy, functioning democracy, without freedom of organization, of assembly. There can be no freedom of, there can be no functioning democracy without accountability, freedom of assembly, free media, and free civil society. So that's an integral part of the democratic society. And now the Hungarian government is undermining that. So it's very concerning. I think most members of the committee are very concerned.
I'm sad that again we are discussing the situation in Hungary. At the same time, I'm also proud to belong to a house representing all the people of Europe, including the Hungarian people, and raising these issues over and over again, because they go right to the core of what Europe is all about. Now, I have noted that in the past, Mr. Orban has had a tendency of, whenever the European Parliament criticized his government, that he would make himself the victim and say, oh, I'm so innocent, look at the nasty Parliament attacking me. Let me make it very clear. Mr. Orban is no victim of anything or anybody. The real victims here are the Hungarian people, who are denied access to good education, to academic freedom, to the full range of free media, to NGOs. Their freedom is restricted. Not Mr. Orban is the victim, Hungarian people are the victim, and we are standing up for their rights.
The Hungarian government, Mr. Orban, has now set up yet another consultation, a so-called consultation on, well, basically we could put it under the headline of Stopping Brussels. It is a quite outrageous consultation. If you read the questions, then you will see it's not, really a consultation about which way forward or whatever, which you might think, okay, why not ask people? But it's very suggestive questions. So it's not an open consultation. Orban simply wants to have a nodding off for his own position, for his own ranting against Brussels and the European Union by the citizens of Hungary. From the previous consultation again, on immigration and terrorism that Orban did in April 2015, we can, however, see that that the Hungarians are not falling into that trap. The participation in that consultation was very low because indeed people have other problems in Hungary, and I think it's just a matter of trying to hide the real problems in Hungary, for which we then have these consultations by Orban, where he goes around like being the strong guy marching against Brussels, whereas he sits himself in the council, where he's part of all the decision making, and while a lot of decision making in Brussels also helps a lot the Hungarian citizens. So these sort of inflammatory consultations are really, really not helpful. They are harmful also because with that, Orban is really spreading and inciting hatred, and he's doing a blame game, which I think is not at all healthy if we want to have a good cooperation inside the European Union. Inside this question, Orban not only slashes Brussels, he also suggests that international and foreign-supported organizations, so basically NGOs, that do a lot of good work in Hungary as well as elsewhere, are threatening the safety and sovereignty of Hungary. Like these sort of suggestive questions he has put forward in the consultation. So from our point of view, it's very clear it's not Brussels that should be stopped, but rather Orban needs to be stopped. And for that, we also need the instruments Sofia and others have mentioned, the various instruments we have in place. As President Steinmeier has said just this week in plenary, it's very important that the European Union stands up for its own values, for its rule of law, for its democracy, but that does not only need to show itself how we act outside the European Union, but very much how we act inside the European Union. And for that, I think it's really important that Parliament, Commission and Member States work very closely and very decisively together in order to ensure that human rights are valid everywhere inside the European Union.
Na debati održanoj u Komitetu za građanska prava ovdje u Evropskom parlamentu učestvovala i direktorica Kancelarije Fondacije Otvorenog društva za Evropsku uniju u Briselu, gospođa Heder Grabe. Pitali smo je za razlog inicijative mađarske vladajuće stranke da zabrani rad Sorosovih organizacija, a postavili smo i neka druga pitanja.
What seems to be going on in Hungary is really about a power struggle within that country. It's about civil society, who are the last remaining critical voices which are able to speak openly and criticize all kinds of problems like corruption, for example, bribing of doctors, problems in the education system, and so on. Now, as we know, over the past few years, there have been problems with media freedom in Hungary and also with the independence of the judiciary. And that's something that the European Union has criticized, and where Hungary has been made to make changes to its legislation as a result of EU criticism. So this now seems to be a new front in the approach of Fidesz to try to ensure that civil society is also more under its control by trying to control the funding of non-governmental organizations.
Kako tumačite činjenicu da se jedna zemlja članica Evropske unije u kojoj bi trebalo biti apsolvirano pitanje implementacije onih bazičnih evropskih vrednosti i principa demokratije, da se ovo dešava?
Well, in the run-up to 2004, when Hungary joined the European Union, of course, Hungary, like all the other countries that joined then, Poland, Slovakia, and so on, had to meet the Copenhagen conditions for entry, including stability of institutions, guaranteeing the rule of law, democracy, human rights, protection of minorities, and so on.
I važnost civilnog društva.
Indeed. Well, civil society was very much seen as part of that. And of course, the EU has funded civil society a great deal in Hungary, as well as in Macedonia and other countries, because it's a vital part of a vibrant democracy. But after a country joins the European Union, there isn't the same kind of rigorous scrutiny of its behaviour, because once it's a member, it is taking part in all of the decisions, as all the other members are too. And that means you no longer have the annual progress reports, you no longer have the monitoring of the country's progress in democracy, because the EU, after all, is a club of members. And once you are a member of the club, the other members are much more reluctant to criticize you.
Da li, vi ste ovdje u Briselu i veoma pažljivo pratite šta se dešava u evropskim institucijama, da li je ova tema otvorena nekad u Evropskom parlamentu, gdje bi trebalo da se debatiraju ove stvari, jer, kako kažu mađarski poslanici, koji nažalost nisu već prihvatili, i evo nema ih da dođu, i čak i oni koji su prihvatili nisu večeras s nama, da li postoji ta debata šta se to dešava i zašto jedna fondacija koja je podržala taj broj civilnih nevladinih organizacija u celoj istočnoj i jugoistočnoj Evropi baš sada nailazi na otpore i na takve napade u zemaljama u kojim je stvorila civilno društvo?
Well, this isn't only about open society foundations, it's about a whole range of funding to civil society in the country, including from the European Union itself, as well as from, for example, German political foundations and other foundations that are operating in Europe. So there have been debates in the European Parliament about this, because many MEPs are very concerned about this issue. The Libe Committee, this is the Committee on Civil Liberties, has debated the issue several times recently. There have also been resolutions in the past. So it has been debated in the Parliament, and of course, there are plenty of opposition MEPs from Hungary who raise it as well. The tricky thing is that the European Parliament does not itself put sanctions on any member state, and the Parliament's role in all of this depends on how far the Council of Ministers, which means basically the other 27 members, are prepared to push the issue. So the Parliament has been quite active and quite vocal, but we also need to see vocal support from other member states, particularly those where there are foundations which are themselves funding civil society in Hungary.
Znači, priča je počela, problem osobito otvorenog društva, Fondacije Otvorenog društva je počela u Rusiji. I nakon toga se polako preljela u Mađarskoj. A sad iz Mađarske ide prema celom regionu jugoistočne Evrope i Balkana. Da li je to neka ruska priča u Evropi?
The kinds of measures that are going ahead or being considered at any rate in Hungary are eerily reminiscent of what has already happened in Russia. Russia has a law on NGOs which calls them foreign agents, which stigmatizes them, which encourages people to see them not as loyal Russians trying to help their own society or being critical of government, but instead somehow being illegitimate organizations. So we see the same kind of rhetoric and the same kind of tactics being used. In Russia, many NGOs and indeed foundations were closed down through very aggressive use of tax investigations, audits, criminal penalties, and the personal persecution, really the intimidation of staff who were working. They were often providing important services to ordinary Russians. It's quite frightening to see the same kind of tactics starting in an EU member state. It's really worrying that a government which is a member of the European Union, which is democratically elected in terms of its election results, feels it necessary to start moving in that same direction. You know, this is not Egypt, it's not Russia, it's not Azerbaijan. This is an EU member state. We shouldn't see this kind of practice in an EU country.
Kako se to sad reflektira u drugim zemljama u Evropi? Iz Rusije se ta kampanja prelila u Mađarskoj. Da li se to širi sad po Evropi? Kakav je vaš utisak?
My impression is that a number of member states are very concerned about this because civil society is seen as a vital part of a vibrant democracy. To have critical voices able to talk openly about the government and about the way the state is operating is a fundamental part of a free society. It's fundamental to the EU's values, but also to universal values. So there is very great concern about this. But the problem is that at EU level, there is no formal rules about it. We have, of course, the rule of law mechanism, and we have a certain number of principles and guidelines. But this is not like the legislation that governs, for example, the single market, where if a member state oversteps the mark and breaches EU law, then there are clear sanctions, there is a clear methodology to follow. Here, it's very much more open. It's more about soft law. And that's one of the reasons why it's tricky for the EU to respond to this. They have, of course, reacted in the past when, for example, there was clear discrimination against foreign media companies operating in Hungary. There, Hungary had to change its legislation. We've also seen action when the independence of the central bank was threatened. We've also seen action when there were problems with the state broadcasting regulator.
Ali u ovom slučaju Evropska komisija nema šta uraditi.
Well, let's see what happens, because this law has not been introduced yet. There have been a lot of rumours circulating in the Hungarian press. There have been a number of threats made in oral statements by Fidesz party members, but nothing has actually been tabled. So we're being kept in suspense about it.
A cilj tog zakona je da bukvalno zabrani rad fondacije.
We simply don't know what is in this law, who it will affect. The fact that it hasn't been tabled indicates a lack of transparency and perhaps a certain hesitation on the part of the government. We simply don't know what is going to happen. But what's worrying is it already has a chilling effect on the activities of civil society who wonder whether they will be targeted. And that affects whether they can provide, for example, meals to school children or help to the disabled or the kinds of services they provide to Hungarian citizens every day. I think it's a real shame to keep organizations that are out helping citizens with this additional burden, with these threats, with this kind of intimidation by talk about a law that hasn't even been promulgated yet.
Kako se sad to reflektira na Balkanu? Da li je, znamo slučaj Makedonije, kako je u drugim zemljama u regiji?
For this kind of thing to happen in an EU member state does not set a good example for countries that would like to join the EU someday. It's really important that the European institutions and the other member states make it clear that this is not normal behaviour in a European democracy and that the Copenhagen conditions for joining still apply. Otherwise, it looks as if countries can simply introduce laws which intimidate and which frighten critical voices of the government and get away with it. That's not the kind of message the EU has sent to the Balkan countries that want to join over the years. It's very important that at this point it's really, really clear from the Commission and from the Member States as well as from the Parliament what are the standards of European democracy, that the EU still stands for the rule of law, for the stability of institutions and not allowing civil society to be intimidated.
Možete li sa konkretnim primjerima da mi date, da poslučite konkretne primjere Da li Fondacija Otvoreno društvo finansira prolevo orijentirane nevladine organizacije, medijume ili to radi podjednako i sa onima koji su prodesno orijentirani? Jer jedna od optužba je da Soros, Fondacija Otvoreno društvo, deluje u podršku jačanja levice generalno.
Well, the Open Society foundations have supported thousands of organizations across the Balkans, as well as tens of thousands of organizations across Europe as a whole. It would be quite hard to argue that every single one of them is only on one part of the political spectrum. You also have to remember that a lot of these organizations are local. They're providing local services, for example, opening up a bus route for people in rural areas, or they're providing schools to children in kindergartens, school meals to children in kindergartens, or in the case of Macedonia, providing wigs to women who are having chemotherapy and who can't afford to buy them themselves. It's these kinds of initiatives. If you look at what Open Society foundations actually fund on the ground, in education, in healthcare, what we did, for example, through the blockade of Macedonia immediately after independence, these are pretty uncontroversial things. They're things that we would all agree are really important for citizens of the country. And the idea that this is simply a partisan thing, it's quite hard to bear it out when you look at what is actually funded.
Jedno zadnje pitanje možda. Jedan od argumenta napada na celu fondaciju i je uloga Sorosa onakvu kakvu smo je vidjeli u onim dokumentima iz Wikileaksa. Kako tumačite taj njegov uticaj koji se može vidjeti jasno u tim dokumentima koji su probijeni putem Wikileaksa?
The documents that were published by WikiLeaks are internal strategy documents, budget documents, the kind of thing that any organization produces for its internal planning and auditing and accounting. Most of those documents were already public because we put them on the Open Society Foundation's website, or the individual national foundations put them on their websites. So there was nothing really very surprising or shocking in these documents. Most of it was already in the public domain. What's important about what it showed is the huge range of activity that we are supporting a large number of people worldwide, in about 100 countries worldwide. And we're providing all kinds of support, particularly to people who don't otherwise have a voice and who are otherwise marginalized in political debates. So we're trying to support those who are not part of the elite, who don't have access to, for example, education or indeed to political influence. So it's a huge range of activities. It's across a lot of countries, and it's covering a wide range of areas. So it's not surprising that you can produce a lot of documents on the basis of that kind of activity. But I haven't seen anything in it that is really very objectionable in terms of how to support citizens.
Postoji jasna bliskost između Hillary Clinton i Georgea Sorosa.
George Soros has never made a secret of the fact that he has funded political candidates in the United States, where it is legal to do so, where the campaign finance laws permit the funding of individual campaigns. In Europe, we are in a different situation where campaign finance laws are different. And so here, Open Society Foundations, which of course is separate from George Soros, he's our chairman, but it's a foundation which has local roots in individual countries. We are funding according to local needs.
I da završimo ovu našu emisiju, nažalost, bez učestva mađarskih poslanika. Moje pitanje se odnosi na perspektivu građanskog društva, koje znamo da je veoma važno za razvoj evrointegracijskih procesa u celoj regiji, u regiji Zapadnog Balkana. Pa šta mislite, koja je vaša prognoza? Kako će se civilno društvo razvijati dalje, imajući u vidu ovu kampanju koja iz Moskve preko Budimpešte se spušta na jug prema Balkanu?
It's getting ever harder for civil society to stay independent and to allow a whole range of people to take part in politics and in public life. And that's a real pity, because people deserve to have their say. They deserve to be able to be heard and to interact with their politicians freely. And civil society is part of that. It's only part of it. You also, of course, need to have elections and democratic institutions. But civil society is a critical player, especially in countries which don't have such a free press and where people feel that they can't get access access to justice or to education or to health without paying bribes, or where they are worried that if they speak out, they will be intimidated, they might lose their job, their children might have trouble at school. It's really important that there are organizations that can help people and that people are free to access those organizations. And that's really what we're standing for in Europe. Open Society Foundations has always supported civil society, often because there weren't so many other actors who are able to support it. Now there are more. Now there's the European Union, there's the EEA grants run by Norway, there are many other foundations. And we stand with those foundations in asking the European Union to ensure that civil society can remain vibrant in Europe.
To je sve za ovo izdanje programa Balkan u Evropi koje možete pogledati na našem web portalu aljazeera.net/Balkans. Hvala vam na pažnji.